Okay. Yep, let me lower the volume on that. It's probably loud. So, yeah. I just thought I'd start streaming because I had the time today, you know? Yeah, today I'm just gonna read some SCP Foundation entries. It's gonna be something interesting, I think. I just picked out one of the ones that turned up in a Google search because it looked interesting. Because the thing about this one is that it doesn't have a name. It's SCP-055. And when you look it up, it's just marked as unknown. And this is an object class Keter, which, for those who don't know, it basically means it's really dangerous. It could probably kill people, you know? Just like, or end the world. I'm actually not sure how the specifications work yet. I'd have to look into that a little more. But yeah. So yeah, I'm just gonna read this one. So this is SCP number 055. Object class Keter with some special containment procedures because it's a dangerous SCP. So, object, unnamed, unknown, we don't know what it is. I haven't read this yet. Is kept within a 5 by 5 by 2.5 meters square room constructed of cement with 50 centimeters of thickness. I do not go by centimeters. I should know. Let's see. 50 centimeters, 2.5. I don't know. Let me get my phone because I don't feel like thinking right now. 50, 2.5. So that's 20 inches of cement. That's really thick. With a Faraday cage surrounding the cement walls. I don't know what a Faraday cage is. Do you guys know what a Faraday cage is? I'm also gonna look that up because I have no idea what a Faraday cage is. Faraday cage. Let's see. It is an enclosure used to block electromagnetic fields. Okay, so this SCP has something affects electromagnetic fields somehow. That's why they need a Faraday cage to secure it, which is interesting. Where was I? Access is via a heavy containment door measuring 2 by 2 by 2.5 meters constructed on bearings to ensure the door closes and locks automatically unless it's held open deliberately. Okay. Security guards are not to be posted outside SCP-055's room. It is further advised that all personnel maintaining or studying other SCP objects in the vicinity try to maintain a distance of at least 50 meters from the geometric center of the room, as long as this is reasonably practical. Interesting. Description. SCP-055 is a self-keeping secret, or anti-meme, or anti-memetic? I'm not actually sure what that means. Information about SCP-055's physical appearance, as well as its nature, behavior, and origins, is self-classifying. So it hides itself, basically. To clarify, how Site-19 originally acquired SCP-055 is unknown. When SCP-055 was obtained and by whom is unknown. SCP-055's physical appearance is unknown. It is not indescribable or invisible. Individuals are perfectly capable of entering SCP-055's container and observing it, taking mental or written notes, making sketches, taking photographs, and even audio or video recordings. An extensive log of such observations is on file. However, information about SCP-055's physical appearance leaks out of a human mind after such an observation. Individuals tasked with describing 055 afterwards find their minds wandering and lose interest in the task. Individuals tasked with sketching a copy of a photograph of SCP-055 are unable to remember what the photograph looks like, as are researchers overseeing the test. Security personnel who have observed SCP-055 via closed-circuit television cameras emerge after a full shift, exhausted and effectively amnesiac about the events of the previous hours. Who authorized the construction of SCP-055's containment room, why it was constructed in this way, or what the purpose of the described containment procedures may be, are all unknown. Alright, that all checks out. Despite SCP-055's container being easily accessible, all personnel at Site-19 claim no knowledge of SCP-055's existence when challenged. That's wild. All of these facts are periodically rediscovered, usually by chance readers of this file, causing a great deal of alarm. This state of concern lasts minutes at most, before the matter is simply forgotten about. A great deal of scientific data has been recorded from SCP-055, but it cannot be studied because everyone keeps forgetting about it. At least one attempt has been made to destroy SCP-055, or possibly move it from containment at Site-19 to another site, meeting failure for reasons unknown. SCP-055 may present a major physical threat, and indeed may have killed many hundreds of personnel, and we would not know it. Certainly, it presents a gigantic memetic mental threat, hence its Keter classification. I'm going to look up what memetic means. Also, hello, Ren, Jaybird, Minecraft. I see you are here. Hello, 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 hello. Yes, we're reading about this weird SCP-055. It has no name, and we don't know anything about it because everyone keeps forgetting about it, and that's its whole spiel. I was gonna look up what memetic means. Memetic. This word, memetic. The word memetics is the study of information and culture based on I can't read, based on an analogy with Darwinian evolution. Proponents of memetics as evolutionary culture describe it as an approach of cultural information transfer. I still don't know what that means. What does it mean if something is memetic? Beliefs that survive aren't necessarily true, rules that survive aren't necessarily fair, and rituals that survive aren't necessarily necessary. Okay, so that's the study of memes, memetics. Okay. Interesting. It's like something about... It sounds philosophical to me. Yeah, go do your homework, bro. Anyway. Here we have some documents. Okay. Let's see what it says. Document 0551, an analysis of SCP-055. The author puts forward the hypothesis that SCP-055 was never formally acquired by redacted, and is in fact an autonomous or remotely controlled agent inserted at Site-19 by an unidentified third party for one or all of the following purposes. Number 1. To silently observe or interfere with activities at Site-19, to silently observe or interfere with activities at other SCP foundations, to silently observe or interfere with activities of humanity worldwide, to silently observe or interfere with other SCP objects, or to silently observe or interfere with redacted. No action to counter any of these potential threats is suggested, or indeed theoretically possible. They just forget about them. Addendum. Hey, is this thing really an anti-meme? Or I don't know if I should be pronouncing that anti-meme. Why doesn't the fact that it's an anti-meme get wiped? We must be wrong about that somehow. Wait a minute. What if we were to keep notes about what it isn't? Would we remember those? Bartholomew Hughes, NSA. Document 2. Report of Dr. John Marashek. Usually the names are redacted in SCP entries, which is interesting. So, Survey Team... Survey Team number 19055-127-BXE was successfully able to enter SCP-055's container, and ascertain the appearance and, to some degree, the nature of the object. Notes were taken according to the project methodology. See redacted. After which the container was sealed again. Excerpt from a transcript of personal debriefing follows. Dr. Hughes. Okay. I'm going to need you to answer some questions about number 55 now. Number what? SCP Object 55. The object you just examined. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think we have a 55. Okay then, redacted. I'd like you to tell me what you've been doing for the past 2 hours. What? Subject appears uncomfortable. I don't know. Okay then. Do you remember that we all agreed that it wasn't spherical? That what wasn't? Oh, right. It isn't round at all. Object 55 isn't round. So you remember it now. Well, no, I mean, I don't know what it is, but I know there is one. It's something you can't remember, and it's not a sphere. Wait a minute. What's not a sphere? Object 55. Object what? Doc, do you remember agreeing that something wasn't shaped like a sphere? Oh, right. Oh, I love this one. It appears to be possible to remember what SCP-055 is not. Negations of fact. And to repeatedly deduce its existence from these memories. Personnel involved in survey number 19-055-127-BXE reported moderate levels of disorientation and psychological trauma associated with cycles of repeated memory and forgetfulness of SCP-055. However, no long-term behavioral or health problems were observed, and psych assessments of survey personnel showed consistent reports of this distress fading over time. Recommendations. It may be worthwhile to post at least one staff member capable of remembering the existence of SCP-055 to each critical site. Alright, that's good. Okay, so it is an object class Keter, but we don't know anything about it. How do we know? It might have killed people, that's why. So this is a really weird one. I mean, they're all weird, but like, this one's weird. Because they know it's dangerous, or at least they think it is, or at least they know it's not dangerous. Because, you know, then it would be marked as safe. There are other similar entries like this one. Like, say, the tree that doesn't scream. And it's kind of similar. It's not the same premise, but like basically, the tree that doesn't scream is a tree that doesn't scream, you know, like most trees, but all the entries on the tree that doesn't scream are experiments trying to get the tree to scream, you know, ads. So yeah, let's see this. What's next here? We need to talk about 55. Let's read that. All right. Ooh, we have some quotes. This should be fun. All right. This is going well. Just wanted to check. All right. So it says, "Can I smoke?" This time the receptionist narrows her eyes at Marion. "No," she says. No, you can't smoke anywhere on Site 200. Just because it's an administration building doesn't mean we don't have lungs. Or labor law." Marion notices the exasperation on the young woman's face. "I've asked you that before, haven't I? Twice in the last quarter hour," the receptionist says. "You must really need a smoke." She's genuinely puzzled at the repeated question, and she's doing a bad job of concealing her puzzlement. "You think this is like Memento, don't you?" Marion offers charitably. "You think I have no long-term memory, and if I stay in one place for too long, I forget why I'm there." Memento. Have I read that one? I don't think I've read that one. We should look at that one later. The receptionist is only just old enough to remember that film. Oh wait, it's a film. Okay, I thought it was a reference to a different entry. But if it were, then it would probably have a hyperlink on it. I guess? Marion smiles sympathetically and shakes her head. It's nothing so simple. Minutes pass. She toys obsessively with her lighter. She's turning 50 this year and slowly graying, well on her way out of petite towards little old lady. In her bag, her phone beeps because it's time for a pill, but she tells it to remind her later. There is a slight tremble in her fingers, but that's not age-based infirmity. That's just ordinary nerves. She's nervous because she's here to meet an O5, and O5s are scary. O5s never want to see you for a small thing. It's the end of the world, or nothing. So, like, if you guys don't know, the O5s are basically, like, the original 5 members of the SCP Foundation. They're, like, the main heads of the Foundation, and no one actually knows if there's only 5 of them, hence the name O5. No one knows if there even is one of them. No one knows if any of them actually exist. Only the O5s, and supposedly the O5s are the ones that know the most about the entries in the SCP Foundation, and that they know which is the true entry of SCP-001, which is basically like the very first entry on the SCP Foundation site, you know, and it's like something that about the end of the world or something. But it's filled with a bunch of different fake entries. I read a few of them, or maybe I only read one of them on the stream. I don't remember which one it was, but it's really interesting. So anyway, let's continue. Finally, 40 minutes late, the door to the inner office opens. 4 or 5 high-ranked Foundationers spill out, carrying laptops or briefcases. As a group, they head straight past reception, out to cars which are waiting. Marion recognizes a few of the faces. The Site-19 site director, the head recruiter for Western Europe. None of them glance in her direction. Once they're gone, 058's assistant, see, 8. There's definitely more than 5. 058's assistant pokes his head around a door. He's 20-something, and probably youthful, like a teenager stuffed into one of his dad's business shirts. His haircut is barely regulation. In one hand, he holds a tablet computer showing his boss's day planner. It's packed. The man evidently does not sleep. Marion, you can come through now. The office door closes behind them with an unusually heavy mechanical clunk, as if the whole thing is part of a machine built into the office walls. While Marion takes the indicated chair and sets her bag down, the assistant turns and does some confusing additional things to the door, causing it to make several further strange noises. O5s have non-trivial privacy and security requirements. The office is spacious, but somehow contrives to be dark despite 2 big corners of window and broad daylight outside. The walls are all bookshelves and dark wood paneling. Perfectly stylish, but a style from the 90s. A little worn and not yet old enough to be fashionable again. As for the fellow behind the desk, well, an O5 never looks like you imagine. Marion takes a deep breath. So, what's the topic? All I got was the meeting invitation. No agenda or subject. I mean, an O5 says jump, you jump, but... Looking to her right, she notices that the assistant, without saying anything or making any undue noise, has set his tablet down on the table, produced a gun, and aimed it at her head. Marion stops talking. She sits still in her chair for a little while, absorbing the change of pace, letting her heart rate rise to a hummingbird's and then start to flatten again. Okay, she hazards. She licks her lips and grips the armrests, otherwise staying perfectly still, waiting for another prompt. The assistant's face is totally neutral now, like this is just how meetings go. Maybe it is for people up here. Who are you? 058 asks her. Miriam blinks. What? Oh God. Let me rephrase. 058 says. Marion Wheeler, 49, with loving husband and 2 boys in tow, likes camping, hiking, ornithology. Boring mother with perfect airtight background and financials, as far back as we can examine. And you've got full Foundation credentials, which we've never issued, including access to a list of installations and rooms, which some of these locations don't exist. or were torn down decades ago. At least one hasn't been built yet you've got the front door key to it. That's before we get to your SCP access control list, which I can only term as egregious. So you're a spy, and your objectives are misaligned with ours, and Clay wanted to cut Xi 3 loose on you, but I was able to bring him around. I talked him into a face-to-face. I thought there was a slim chance that if we locked you in a bomb-proof room and asked politely, you'd have the good sense to spare yourself the rest. Marion has long since stopped listening. You dullard, she says, now she can finally speak. I'm your chief of anti-memetics. Anti-memetics? Whatever. We don't have an anti-memetics division, Clay says. Yes, you do. We do. 058 says, we have a memetics division, a telecontainment division, fire services, Ops A, Ops B, D personnel, and 24 others. We don't have an anti-memetics division. Do we have an irony division? Marion asks. She hesitates hopefully. No? All right. Well, try this. Why do you think the anti-memetics division would show up in the listing? This is just a cover story, Clay says to 058, not taking his eyes off Marion. It's a good one, but she's had it worked out in advance. Clay, lose the piece, says the 05. Grudgingly, Clay does so. Marion relaxes fractionally. There are SCPs with dangerous memetic properties, she says. There are contagious concepts which require containment, just like any physical threat. They get inside your head and ride your mind to reach other minds, right? Right, 058 says. You can name a score of SCPs fitting this description without even thinking. There are SCPs with anti-memetic properties, Marion goes. There are ideas which cannot be spread. There are entities and phenomena which harvest and consume information, particularly information about themselves. You take a Polaroid photo of one, it'll never develop. You write a description down with a pen on paper and hand it to someone, but what you've written turns out to be hieroglyphs and nobody can understand them, not even you. You can look directly at one and it won't even be invisible, but you'll still perceive nothing there. Dreams you can't hold on to, and secrets you can never share, and lies, and living conspiracies. It's conceptual subculture of ideas consuming other ideas, and sometimes segments of reality. Sometimes people. Which makes them a threat. That's all there is to it, really. Anti-mems are dangerous, and we don't understand them. Therefore, they are part of the problem, hence my division. We can do the sideways thinking that's needed to combat something which can literally eat your combat training. 058 stares back at her for a long moment. Clay fidgets, disliking and distrusting the story, but the 05 seems more open to the concept. Name one, he says. Name an anti-memetic SCP. SCP-055. That's the one we just read about. Marion says promptly. There is no SCP-055, Clay retorts. Again, yes there is, Marion says. There isn't, Clay asserts. SCP numbers aren't assigned sequentially. There are gaps. That number hasn't been assigned. It's not superstition. We have enough to be concerned about without arbitrary numerological mysticism. We have SCP-666 and we have SCP-013, but there is no SCP-001 and there's no SCP-055. Clay, 058 says. You should look at this. He turns to his monitor so Clay can see the file that he has just retrieved. Clay bends over and reads it from top to bottom, stunned. He scrolls back and reads it all a second time. But the file's dated from 2008, 058 says. It's got all the right flags and signatures. It's keyed and coded. It's real. You've seen this before? Clay asks him. Never in my life, 058 says. As far as I can remember, anyway. On the other hand, if the content is accurate, both of us have probably seen it dozens of times. Clay glares at Marion. This isn't possible. Marion nearly spits. For Christ's sake, Clay, how long have you been working here? But if this SCP is this powerful, he begins. Yes? Who wrote the file? The 05 finishes. And for that matter, How was the interview conducted? And who is Bartholomew Hughes? And most importantly, how do you, Mrs. Wheeler, retain knowledge of any of this? Bart Hughes wrote the file. He's dead, Marion says. What happened to him? You don't want to know. There is a very long pause while both 058 and his assistant react to this. In fact, they pass through a long, discrete sequence of reactions. Indignation at the seeming rudeness, confusion at Wheeler's incaution in front of the sinister superiors, surprise at the magnitude of the claim, pure disbelief, comprehension, and finally, horror. What, 058 asked carefully, would happen if we did know? It would happen to you as well, Marion says levelly. As for the rest of your questions, we manage that pharmaceutically. You know we have Class A amnestics for people who very badly need to forget things. Of course you do. Who could forget about Class A amnestics? Well, in antimemetics, we have a disparate pill for people who need to remember things that would otherwise be impossible to remember. Amnestics. I'm sorry. It's just the name of it. Mystics. Oh my god, yes, I'm streaming. Mystics. How do I read that? I'm sorry. I just got thrown off. Class W, X, Y, and Z. Same Greek root as the word mnemonic. Mnemonic. The M is silent. Okay. The M is silent. Nestics. Nestics. So these are amnestics. So these are nestics. Okay, I get it now. Thank you, Marion, for describing how to pronounce a word that you said out loud. Okay. Same Greek root as the word mnemonic. Mnemonic. The M is silent. In her bag, her phone beeps again. With a nod of approval from the 05, Marion reaches into her bag and turns her phone off, acknowledging the prompt this time instead of postponing it. She pulls a blister pack from another pocket and pops a pill out. It's hexagonal and green. She holds it up and is satisfied to see a flicker of recognition from 058's face. He's beginning to put it back together. Marion says, "These are Class W nestics, the weakest, suitable for continual use. 2 pills per day. Go down to the site pharmacy and ask. The pharmacist will claim they don't stock any such thing. They're misremembering. Tell them to double check." 058 sighs. And now I think I get it. I see why we're having this conversation at all. Yes, Marion says, popping a second pill out and handing it over to him. It's because you missed a dose. You're supposed to be on these, the same as me and everybody on my staff. It's the only way we can work. You forgot to take a pill, and then you forgot all the information that the pills were helping you retain. You forgot why you were taking them, who gave them to you, where to get more. You forget about me and my entire department, and now I have to bring you up to speed. And if I take this, 058 says, I'll remember this whole conversation and we won't have to have it again? Hopefully not, Marion says. Clay pipes up. Should I be taking those? Sorry, kiddo, 058 says. Need to know. Maybe when you're an 05 yourself. He swallows the pill. Marion swallows hers too. So what is SCP-055? 058 asks. SCP-055 is nothing, Marion says, now relaxing entirely. SCP-055 is, as described in the file, a powerful information autosuppressor. As far as experimentation has uncovered, it can only be defined in negative terms. We can only record what it isn't. We know it isn't safe or Euclid. We know it isn't round or square or green or silver. We know it isn't stupid, and we know it isn't alone. But what we do know is that it's weak. It's weak because the only antimemetic agent in our possession which has a physical entry in the files... Because it's the only antimemetic agent in our possession which has a physical entry in the files. Oh, I get it now. We have paper records of the thing. We have containment procedures. It's not safe, which means it's dangerous, but it's contained. 058 blinks. Do you have procedures? Where? Marion points at her head. Then how many other anti-mems are there? How much more dangerous do they get? 10 that I know of, Marion says. Just statistically, probably at least 5 more that I don't know of. This does not count the anti-memetic entities freely roaming the halls, not under containment. There are at least 2 in this room with us right now. Don't look. I said don't look. It's pointless. 058 does an impressive job of controlling himself, keeping his attention focused on Marion. Clay doesn't fare so well, and quickly sweeps the whole room, even checking behind his back. Making an ass of himself, essentially, he finds nothing. He looks baffled. There is an invisible monster which follows me around and likes to eat my memories, Marion explains patiently. SCP-4987. Don't look it up, it's not there. I've learned to manage with it. It's like a demanding pet. I produce tasty memories on purpose so it doesn't eat something important like my passwords or how to make coffee. And what's the other one? Clay asks. With another nod from 058, Marion goes to her back again. This time she pulls out a gun and shoots Clay. Oh no! Clay! Clay is dead now. More aghast than in pain, Clay collapses sharply against the bookcase behind him. Pulling his head around to face Marion, he manages, How did you... Marion stands, aims more carefully. Oh boy, Clay is very dead. 058, again, does an impressive job of not reacting. That's Clay's gun, he deadpans. You stole it from him. It's tricky to steal a firearm this heavy from someone without them noticing, Marion explains. I'm gonna start that sentence over again. It's tricky to steal a firearm this heavy from someone without them noticing, Marion explains, unloading it and carefully setting it down. But stealing a firearm and then stealing their memory of the theft is a little easier. Like I said, a pet. Some pets are dumb enough that they can be trained. Yes, 05 says evenly. That much I'd guessed, but why? Because you were supposed to be taking Class W Nestics, Marion says. You can't skip a dose of Class W Nestic. I tried. You can't postpone a dose. You can postpone a dose, but you can't forget unless someone prevents you from taking it. Unless someone actively prevents you from taking it. There's only one person who could get close enough to you to do that, and that's your assistant. And remember when I asked him how long he'd been working here? He didn't answer, 058 says. I thought you were being rhetorical. He doesn't work here, Marion says. He's an anti-mem. Since when do you have an assistant? You don't have an assistant, Brent. Look at this office. It's got one desk. You've got a receptionist outside. She's the one who screens your calls and schedules your meetings. Where does Clay even sit? Where does he fit? Don't blame yourself. You're human and these things are redaction incarnate. You need to think like a space alien to get around them. 058 asks a question which, in any other workplace, would be absurd. Is he dead? Maybe, Marion says. I can put his corpse in our research queue and we'll see what we can see when we open him up. There's a duality here, though. They're like parallel universes sharing the same space. It's conceptual versus concrete, figurative versus physical. It's very unusual for things to cross over. I don't know what Clay was, but he had a human body, which instantly makes him weird, even by our standards. As ever, the search for a stalemate continues. I'll let you know if we get any closer. Any side effects of these pills? 058 asks. Nausea and dramatically increased risk of pancreatic cancer, Marion says, and very bad dreams. Well, that is all we really know about SCP-055, I guess. Or all we don't know. You know, that's pretty cool. I really like this one because of the implication of it, right? The implication that 055 is a weak anti-memetic agent. Anti-memetic SCP. Anti-memetics, by their nature, can't be known. And, you know, it reminds me of the Magnus Archives. I've been re-listening to the Magnus Archives with a friend. We're just starting season 2. And we just got to the part where Michael appears. The distortion. If you're in there, if you're listening to this right now, just, I guess I'll talk about spoilers. I'm not gonna talk about spoilers, but like, well, I'll discuss it a little bit. So Michael, he's a weird guy, right? He would be considered like an anti-memetic type of SCP, right? Just cover your ears or something, okay? Um all right. 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes. I'm gonna put a timer on. Wait, let me just 3 minutes. 3 minute timer. So I can talk about here we go. Yeah. I'm gonna talk about some small like spoilery things about Michael from the Magnus Archives. So basically, Michael, he's a weird little guy, right? He is basically a structure, and he falls under the spiral, which is like a type of horror in the Magnus Archives lore, which focuses on confusion, on like insanity, like not being able to trust your own mind, right? So this sort of thing about like forgetting something that exists or not being able to describe something that exists or not being able to perceive it at all is exactly the sort of thing that the spiral would love to feed on. It doesn't feed on information, it feeds on the fear that you have of not being able to know something that is there, right? Just it's very confusing. And that's the whole premise behind it. I just realized that the chat hasn't been working. The chat box on the stream hasn't been working, but that's fine. It's fine. We're not going to worry about it. And so yeah, this reminds me a lot of that. I love when there's creatures like these, when it comes to any piece of media. I'm going to go back to the other page. And it's so neat, I just love the way that they're described when they're just a little bit like impossible to describe. That's one of my favorite things. So yeah, basically, it's just you can only know what it isn't. And it's very interesting because people talk about proving negatives a lot, how that's impossible to do. But for this case, that's all you can do. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. Very, very interesting. Anyway, yeah, I still have like another minute to be able to talk about Michael. I love Michael. He's my favorite character in the Magnus Archives. He's so weird. He's a neutral guy. Not even a guy, just a building or something. Actually, very confusing. Whatever. 20 seconds. About and I don't know. I've only been streaming for 40 minutes. I could look at another entry, but before I do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about like wait, let's let the last 4 seconds pass before the 3 minutes end. Yeah, anyway. Yeah, that's it. Timer's done. It's been 3 minutes. We're no longer going to talk about spoilers relating to the Magnus Archives. Before we get to, I don't know, thinking about looking at another entry, because I did not plan to look at another entry. I did not think beforehand about that. I want to talk a little bit about like what I've been doing because I haven't been streaming. Hello, welcome back. Little life update because I haven't been streaming. I haven't really been making any posts on Instagram for like, how long was it? Last time I made a post was like a month ago, a little over a month ago. Sometime in, well, July, because that would be a little over a month ago. But the idea is that like around that time, I got a little bit sickly. So I stopped posting for a little bit. I couldn't even stream because when I'd sit down, I would just start feeling bad. Like I just feel like nauseous when I was using my computer, and I don't know why. Like I wanted to stream at that time just because, even though I knew it would be scuffed, because just streaming on a laptop is really taxing on it. I don't know if you can hear the fans when I talk, but they're just going right now. You know, they're just going wild. So I've been actually looking into getting a new computer. I've been looking into, in fact, building a PC. So, like, I did some research and I got some advice from some friends about how to do it. And I'm gonna get some, like, more feedback from someone who actually knows a few more things about computers than I do, because before I did that, I knew basically nothing about computers, much less about how to build them, but I knew that building a PC would be cheaper and, like, more, say, like, fixable, customizable than, say, buying one or getting, like, a really powerful laptop, which I don't really want to get a really powerful laptop. And so yeah. Also, I don't know if you can tell from the audio, but I'm in a new space because, like, I'm kind of in the middle of a moving process. It's been going on for a little while now. So, you know, lots of things happening. I also just started classes, you know, like, so I'm just gonna be extra busy. So at the moment, I still want to keep working on things. Like, I don't know if I want to, like, officially go on, like, a hiatus because of all these things happening or something. So I'm still, like, doodling and working on small things, trying to get back into the swing of, like, making stuff, because after, like, being sick with mycoplasma, that's what I got. I just kind of, I was just really tired, but also I started going to therapy, so that's pretty neat. I have a therapist now. Woo! Woo! I can get therapized. Yay! So yeah, that's basically everything that's been going on with me. So yeah, I don't know. Do you guys want to maybe look at another SCP Foundation entry? Do you guys have anything in mind? Because I did not plan to read a second one, because I thought that my battery wouldn't last this long, but it's actually going pretty well. I forgot that my computer battery lasts quite a lot longer when I'm, like, when I'm not playing a game on my computer while also streaming. You know, so this, you know, I can read a couple more. I could read, like, 2 more whole posts like this one. 2 more whole entries like this one, SCP-055. With their addendums and everything. I'll do my little voice acting thing. I should consider doing a little voice acting job. I wonder if I can do that. I don't know how to do that, I'll be honest. I should figure that out. I think I'd be pretty good at it. I like reading. I don't know. So, let's see. Do you guys have any suggestions for SCP entries to read? I'm gonna look up, meanwhile, I'm gonna look up, like, you know, just SCP, I don't know, SCP things. Popular SCPs. Or we could look at another entry from SCP-001 again. Because those are always fun. Like, they're always a little weird. I also recently found this one page that was an SCP Foundation page, but, like, it looked cleaner and more, like, refined. I don't know where it came from, but it looked really cool. So let's see. I know I've read The Plague Doctor. I'm pretty sure I have not read SCP-173, which is the statue. It's a really weird one. SCP-055 is the one I just read. SCP-106. The Old Man, among the most recognizable and notorious early SCPs. We could read that one. I don't know. Maybe I will. Okay. I'll read The Old Man, and then we'll end it off with an SCP-001 post. Unless The Old Man is a really long one, which I wouldn't know. Let's see. Let's look for it. Hey, look at that. That's the one we just read. What was it? What number was it again? 106? Yeah, SCP-106. Boop. Here we go. Jamaican Joe's Junkyard Jubilee. That's an interesting name. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the old man. 106. Extra-dimensional nasal cavity. What the fuck is that? Man, I love the SCP Foundation wiki. It's so cool. Anyway, SCP-106, the old man. It's loading, blah, blah, blah. Ew, creepy. Ooh, this one has some revisions. 6 and 7. It's an object class Keter. Oh boy, this old man is very dangerous. I think I saw a little comic about this one once, but I don't remember anything about it. So we're gonna go into this blind, just like the other one. Let's see what we've got. Revision 11.8. Should we read the other revisions later? Or not? I think not. Maybe? I don't know. Revision 11. Should I try to get the chat working again? Because, like, I feel like I should. I feel like that's something I should do. Wait a minute. Let me see if I can do that. Or do I just refresh? No. Nope. I don't know. I do not know. Let me see if I can add a source. That is a... What kind of source is that? I'm gonna see if I can... Let me just do this real quick. Real quick. Let me add an existing one. That is... Cancel. I think this one... Oh, there it is. Here's the chat. Here we go. Here's the chat. Yay! Chat is here. Woo! Oh, wait. What happened? Why is it empty? Oh, no! I don't know what I did. Let's refresh. Okay. I don't know what happened. Chat died again. It's gone. It's just gone. I don't know. It just went poof, poof. Goodbye, chat. But I guess it's fine. I'm just gonna... Oh, what? Hey, look! There it is. It's 2 times? Wait, has it been there the whole time and I just didn't notice? Okay. I know I have, like, a chat in, like, a... What do you call it? Like a little cooldown sort of thing, so that it goes away when it's inactive. I don't know. I'll figure that out eventually. It seems to be working just fine though. So yeah, let's get to the entry. SCP-106. Item SCP-106. Item number SCP-106. Object class Keter. It's a deadly one. Special containment procedures with revisions 6, 7, 8 revisions. We're reading revision number 8. No physical interaction with SCP-106 is allowed at any time. All physical interaction must be approved by no less than 2/3 vote from the O5 command. Any such interaction must be undertaken in an IAR-2 maximum security sites after a general non-essential staff evacuation. All staff, research, security, Class D, etc., are to remain at least 60 meters away from the containment cell at all times, except in the event of breach events. Oh boy. Okay, so this is a very dangerous one. SCP-1128. I might look into that later then. I'll have to take a note of that. SCP-106 is to be contained in a sealed container comprised of lead-lined steel. The container will be sealed within 40 layers of identical material, each layer separated by no less than 36 centimeters of empty space. Support struts between layers are to be randomly placed. Container is to remain suspended no less than 60 centimeters from any surface by ELO-2D electromagnetic supports. Secondary containment area is to be comprised of 16 spherical cells, each filled with various fluids and a random assembly of surfaces and supports. Secondary containment is to be fitted with light systems capable of flooding the entire assembly with no less than 80,000 lumens of light instantly with no direct human involvement. Both containment areas are to remain under 24-hour surveillance. Any corrosion observed on any containment cell surfaces, staff members, or other site locations within 200 meters of SCP-106 are to be reported to site security immediately. Any objects or personnel lost to SCP-106 are to be deemed missing or killed in action. No recovery attempts are to be made under any circumstances. Note: continued research and observation have shown that, when faced with highly complex or random assemblies of structures, SCP-106 can be, quote, confused, end quote, showing a marked delay on entry and exit from said structure. SCP-106 has also shown an aversion to direct sun and light. This is not manifested in any form of physical damage, but a rapid exit into the pocket dimension generated on solid surfaces. Interesting. Also, I need water. I'm gonna get some water. Okay, I'll be right back. Wait. I've returned with water, and I am hydrated. And thriving. All right, let's go. These observations, along with those of lead aversion and liquid confusion, have reduced the general escape incidence by 43%. That's pretty significant. The primary cells have also been effective in recovery incidents requiring protocol redacted. Observation is ongoing. Bye-bye, Ren. Hope you enjoyed the stream. Okay. So, the description. Oh, look at the corrosion. Nasty. SCP-106 appears to be an elderly humanoid with a general appearance of advanced decomposition. This appearance may vary, but the rotting quality is observed in all forms. SCP-106 is not exceptionally agile and will remain motionless for days at a time, waiting for prey. SCP-106 is also capable of scaling any vertical surface and can remain suspended upside down indefinitely. When attacking, SCP-106 will attempt to incapacitate prey by damaging major organs, muscle groups, or tendons, then pull disabled prey into its pocket dimension. SCP-106 appears to prefer human prey items in the years of 10 to 25. In the 10 to 25 years of age bracket. SCP-105 causes a corrosion effect in all solid matter it touches, engaging a physical breakdown in materials several seconds after contact. This is observed as rusting, rotting, and cracking of materials, and the creation of a black mucus-like substance. What's this thing for? What's this hyperlink for? What's that all about? The young man. Okay, we're not going to read that now. We'll read that some other time. That should be interesting. Anyway, we were at... I'm just gonna put that on another page. Wait, there we go. Similar to the material coating SCP-106. This effect is primarily detrimental to living tissues and is assumed to be a, quote, pre-digestion, end quote, action. The corrosion continues for 6 hours after contact, after which the effect appears to, quote, burn out. SCP-106 is capable of passing through solid matter, leaving behind a large patch of its corrosive mucus. SCP-106 is able to, quote, vanish inside solid matter, entering what is assumed to be a form of, quote, pocket dimension. SCP-106 is then able to exit this dimension from any point connected to the initial entry point. Examples, quote, entering the inner wall of a room and, quote, exiting the outer wall. Entering a wall and exiting from the ceiling. It is unknown if this is the point of origin for SCP-106 or a simple, quote, layer created by SCP-106. Limited observation of this, quote, pocket dimension has shown it to be comprised mostly of halls and rooms with data expunged entry. This activity can continue for days, with some subjected individuals being released for the express purpose of hunting, recapture, data expunged. Oh boy. Horrors beyond human comprehension. Alright, we have some addendums. Ooh. And some data expunged with a hyperlink. Those are always fun. Okay. Addendum. SCP review notes. Due to the exceedingly difficult to contain nature of SCP-106, SCP is to be reviewed every 3 months or during a post-breach incident. Physical restraints are impossible, and direct physical damage appears to have no effect on SCP-106. Current SCP, as of redacted, revolves around basic observation and immediate response. Previous, more proactive special containment procedures have been recalled due to the event breaches of the Bite of 87. No. They're all redacted. Notes on behavior. SCP-106 appears to go through long periods of, quote, dormancy, in which it will remain completely motionless for up to 3 months. The cause for this is unknown. However, it has been shown that this appears to be used as a lulling tactic. SCP-106 will emerge from this state in a very agitated state and will attack and abduct staff and cause gross damage to its containment cell and the site at large. Recall protocol. Data expunged. SCP-106 appears to hunt and attack based on desire, not hunger. SCP-106 will attack and collect multiple prey items during a hunting behavior event. I'm going to open that in a new tab and see if we can look at that later. Oh dear. It's called treats. Keeping many, quote, alive in the pocket dimension for extended periods of time. I wonder why that has quotes around it. SCP-106 has no determinable limit and appears to collect a random number of prey items during an event. Alright. The inner dimension accessed by SCP-106 appears to only be accessible by SCP-106. Recording and transmission devices have been shown to still operate inside this dimension, though recordings and transmissions are very degraded. It appears that SCP-106 will, quote, play with captured prey, and appears to have full control over time, space, and perception inside this dimension. SCP-106 appears data expunged. I'm going to open another tab for that. There's a lot of tabs on this one. Recall protocol, redacted. In the event of a breach event by SCP-106, a human within the 10 to 25 years of age bracket will be prepped for recall, with the compromised containment cell being replaced and restored for use. When a cell is ready, the lure subject will be injured, preferably via the breakage of a long bone, such as the femur, or the severing of a major tendon, such as the Achilles tendon. Yikes! The lure subject will then be placed in the prepped cell, and the sound emitted by said subject will be transmitted over the site public address system. SCP-106 will typically begin to gravitate towards the lure subject within 10 to 15 minutes after hearing the subject. Should SCP-106 not respond to the initial broadcast, additional physical trauma is to be administered to the lure subject at 25-minute intervals until SCP-106 responds. Multiple lure subjects may be used in the case of major breach events. Boy. SCP-106 will typically enter a dormant state after finishing with a lure subject. In addition, subjects may data expunged. After release by SCP-106, subject had been missing for 2 hours. Subject remained alive for 1 hour after release. Spooky. Very spooky. Well, horrors beyond human comprehension. Anyway, I'm gonna read the hyperlinked things. So that would be starting with this one, the one that says a black mucus-like substance, which hyperlinked to this entry called The Young Man. All right. Let's see how this goes. Nobody could like Corporal Lawrence. Wow, great start. Let's take 2. Nobody could like Corporal Lawrence. That's not to say that nobody tried or that he was somehow unfriendly, merely that he was one of those few that seemed to be, quote, wired differently. However, in the trenches of World War I, normalcy was at best a relative term, and one that had minimal relation of life, such as it was. Lawrence fought, listened to orders, and didn't disrupt the other soldiers, and that was all that was required. So what if people felt increasingly uncomfortable around him? In the place where the flesh rotting off of your bones while you were still alive was the baseline of concern, a little personality conflict ran several... Wow, I can't read anymore. A little personality conflict ranked several levels below a paper cut. There we go. Lawrence, for his part, dealt with it as he always had. That is to say, remained totally unaware of the avoidance. The same way a man blind from birth cannot mourn the memory of color, Corporal Lawrence couldn't bemoan a lack of company. He was quiet, as he had nobody to talk to, and still as he had nothing to do, for long stretches of time. The enemy trench, less than a mile away, had gone silent for several days, letting boredom and nervousness sink in even more than normal, coupled with the unease that seemed to radiate off of Lawrence like heat waves. The worst part was that there was no distinct reason to dislike the corporal. He was a plain man, average height, average build, bland of voice and action. Nobody could recall him raising his voice in joy or anger. He did have the occasional odd mannerisms, however. He tended to stare a beat or two longer than was acceptable at people. He rarely slept as well, and bunkmates said he would mumble in his sleep almost constantly. The content of those nocturnal ramblings, when they could be understood, were often odd and potentially unsettling. One private moved to another barracks when he heard the name of his daughter pass Corporal Lawrence's lips, followed by a bubbling, muffled giggle. Ugh. It was strongly theorized that he was sent over the trench by his commanders more out of a desire to have him away than for his minimal combat skill. He and 14 of his fellows were sent across the nightmarishly scarred waste of the no-man's land between the trenches, to reconnoiter the enemy trench and secure it if possible. Many seemed to hope that Lawrence would have the opportunity to prove his devotion to his country by making the ultimate sacrifice for it. It was while he was gone, that 3-day gap as the men held their breath, waiting for a surprise volley of shells, that someone started asking questions. Whereas before it was almost taboo to speak of Corporal Lawrence, since the departure of both him and his, quote, aura, rumor seemed to descend with the passion of the denied. Nobody remembered him ever talking of home. No sweet-smelling letters came. No soggy, dirt-streaked letters left. He mentioned his dreams often and griped sometimes with the men over missed foods or pleasures, but never with any real passion. Questions started to float among even the higher levels of command. Nobody was able to actually find his station orders. He'd come in with a squad of reinforcements transferred from France, but there was no paperwork. The rest of the reinforcement squad had never seen the man before. He'd been lumped in with them the night before the trip, along with the snips and scraps of other squads decimated by the Germans. Whispers filtered among the grunts of the corporal being a curse. Nearly every man who'd shared a bunkhouse with him had gotten trench-foot, and the rooms he haunted always seemed to smell more musty and sickly sweet, even for the trench. The men sent over the no man's land with Corporal Lawrence heard and cared for none of this. Just another man among many, all with death certificates awaiting a stamp that could fall at any moment. They moved fast and low, from crater to crater, slipping over slick mud and barbed wire, the only thing that seemed to grow in that blasted waste. Charging the last spurt into the trench, they were greeted not with the harsh bark of German soldiers and rifles, but a dense, close silence. Preparing for the ambush, the men started to filter out into the tunnels and halls of the trench. The men, already nervous, were not calmed by their investigation. The trenches stank of mold, sweat, and a thin undertaste of rotten fruit. A vile, cloying slime seemed to have pulled in every divot and crack, sticky as glue and itchy on the flesh, in a world where rats and insects would try to snatch food from your mouth even as you ate. They saw nothing alive, not so much as a fly. An armory lay in chaos. Munitions spilled on the ground, rifles tossed like pickup sticks. A mess hall had been reduced to ruins. The tables and chairs piled in the center of the rooms, charred and twisted. The rations seemingly stamped into the dirt by many feet, and still nothing, alive or dead, was found by the increasingly anxious soldiers. Private Dixon found the first body and managed to cry out before vomiting. They knew it had been a man only because nothing else of that size could have been there. It lay on the floor of the barracks. The entire floor. The flesh of it had been smeared somehow, spread like butter over the rough dirt floor. Bones, already looking pitted and rotten, stuck out at random angles, like dead trees in a still swamp. The skull rested on one of the highest bunks, facing the doorway. 10 gleaming white fingertip bones crammed into the cracked eye sockets. As one man went to examine it, he found the back of the skull had been crushed open, the rotting, sagging sponge of a tongue stuffed into the otherwise dry cavity. Ugh. More remains were found, each seemingly more unsettling and strange than the last. A ring of hands in a sandbagged watch post. 10 of them, fingers interlaced like a basket. The wrists ragged and broken. 2 men in a tunnel, skin leathery and thin as mummies. Eye sockets staring empty, mouths locked impossibly wide. Their clothes, mere rags under an oily black scum. The latrines sent even the hardiest back, gagging and shivering, overflowing with excrements and offal. Goblets of meat bobbed and oozed into foul sludge. The whole surface dotted with what looked like thousands of clean, slick eyeballs, nerves and tendons fanning out like goldfish tails. Ugh, so nasty. Corporal Lawrence was the first to find the hole. The other men, loudly debating the better part of valor and a rapid withdrawal from the nightmare trench. It was small, in a section of fresh digging, the start of a new arm of trenches projecting closer to the enemy lines. No more than 4 feet across, it seemed to be the accidental uncovering of a natural chamber, the empty blackness of it defying investigation. Private Dixon, recovered and blessedly numb from his previous ordeals, saw the corporal prod the edge with his boot, then crouched to peer in. Then suddenly slide in head first before the private could so much as utter a shout of question. The private was a good soldier, and rushed to the perceived distress of his fellow. When questioned later, he could provide little illumination as to what happened over the 2 minutes Corporal Lawrence spent in the hole. He could see nothing. The light of a torch seemingly gobbled up a few feet into that dense blackness. There were sounds, the rustle of movement over loose stone or rubble, an odd liquid shifting, a dry rustle that made him think of the insect husks he used to collect in the summer. As he shouted for aid, there was a sudden upwelling of a repulsive stench, like a reptile house gone sour and old, and his fellow soldiers found him retching helplessly beside the hole when they came around the turn. It was as they rushed to Private Dixon's aid that the hand emerged from the hole. They stopped and raised rifles as one body, roaring for the owner of that pale, trembling hand to identify himself. As they watched, another hand joined the first, followed by the pale, shivering head of Corporal Lawrence. He was streaked and smeared with a tarry black ooze, hacking and coughing thinly as he hauled his body up beside that of the gasping private. As they moved to help the men, the corporal vomited up a heavy voiding into... As they moved to help the men, the corporal vomited up a heavy stream of the same repulsive slime that coated his body in smears and globs, his curled, shuddering body voiding more of it into his saturated, foul pants. Pants. That was weird delivery on my part. They were hesitant to touch him, finally doing so after the seemingly endless river of grime stopped pouring from him. He was insensible, eyes rolling and wide, body as limp as a boned fish. Boned fish. Oh man, this is a bit of a long one. What's going on here? Okay. This is a bit of a long one. Okay. Not much longer though. Boned fish. Boned fish. Right here. I'm gonna take a sip of water. The men quit the trench with all speed, half dragging the corporal. They ran with no thought to cover or death, only escape. They crossed in record time, falling into their home trench like so much cordwood, gasping and shivering. One man known to have bludgeoned a German to death with a brick curled on the floor in a sobbing heap. The commanders moved quickly, isolating the men and trying to calm the most lucid for a report. What spilled out would have been immediately dismissed as lies and hallucination, were it not for the earnest, pleading stares of those reporting. Command calmed them with explanations of battle fatigue and strange gas weapon tests, and shared silent, focused stares as the cowed men were ushered out. Corporal Lawrence had little to report. Of his time in the hole, he could, or would, say little. He stated that he had slipped and fallen into what may have been some long-blocked underground pool or perhaps a buried latrine. Of the sounds and smells reported by the private, he had nothing to say, only that he struggled for a long time, then managed to get back out just as the men arrived. Truly, he seemed none the worse for wear. In fact, he seemed in better spirits than many had remembered ever seeing him, favoring the commanders with a wide, giddy smile, as he was dismissed with a warning to not discuss the events. The corporal proved a changed man over the next few days. He was more talkative, but quickly had men wishing for his old, unsettling silence. He rambled about the joys of closed spaces, of creation and destruction that seemed to spring up all around them, about human pleasures missed, the dimensions and ages of which made some men threaten Corporal Lawrence with a quiet and ignoble death, which only seemed to stretch the near-constant smile on his face even wider. Private Dixon, one of the corporal's bunkmates, whispered to a friend that he had woken once to find a corporal standing over him in the night, his eyes as bright and flat as silver dollars. They found the private the next day, snarled into barbed wire. Oh dear, that's gross. Okay. He had guts. Yep. Not one man from that trench survived the Great War. Although few died in battle, a wave of sickness took the trench a few days after Private Dixon's death, a strange wasting sickness. It seemed to eat the flesh like acid, men walking to find previously healthy flesh eaten down to the bone, oozing and blackened. A sergeant was found in a latrine beset by a living carpet of rats. They refused to quit the body, even one shot, and attacked several men before the body was recovered. Relief finally came, the bulk of the men being sent to various hospitals, many wasting away before they even reached the bed. Corporal Lawrence was remanded to a French mental ward, transferred after several complaints from the hospital proper where he was first sent. It seemed his behavior hinted at a growing mental imbalance. culminating with an attempted assault of a nurse, which ended with the loss of 3 fingers from her right hand and the vision in her right eye. The corporal would rant quietly to the other patients, whispers about endless halls, pursuits in the dark, flesh laid out like pages of a book. He was dismissed as so much war fatigue, even as his behavior grew less violent and more unsettling. He vanished several times from the ward, only to appear several hours later as if nothing had happened. When pressed, he would begin to sing "My Bonnie Lies Over the Sea" in an endless monotone until the doctors left, exasperated. Others on the ward clamored to be transferred from the whispering madman. A stale, musty foulness seemed to sit in the air wherever he stayed, and incidents of infection and the strange, consuming sickness that had beset his home trench seemed to follow him like a cloud. Numerous attempts were made to transfer the man, only to be met with bureaucratic confusion. No records were found of the man, no entry papers, commendations, or incidents, not even a birth certificate. Through it all he sat, for hours on end, cross-legged on his bed, occasionally humming tunelessly, or rambling off the names of his wardmates between short, bumbling giggles. Corporal Lawrence and 18 men vanished one November night, between a 5-minute nurse rotation at 3 in the morning. The room reeked of rust, oil, mold, and sweet rot. Thick black swaths of crumbling ooze coated the beds and several of the walls, wide patches of it smearing and eating into the floor. Of the men there was no sign at first. As they searched, one nurse shifted a bed aside, only to shriek and nearly trip across one of the sunken, reeking depressions in the floor. In a tight, perfect spiral, where what appeared to be hundreds of teeth, resting neatly on the floor. After counting, they accounted for the total of all the teeth of every living soul in that ward, but one. The corporal was never found, nor were the men. The incident was swallowed by the constant barrage of horrors from the front and forgotten with ease. Stories of a cursed trench wandered across the front lines, often squelched for being bad luck. Still they came, stories of strange deaths, of disappearing men found days later alive, but broken and twisted beyond comprehension. Stories of a strange, dark figure stalking the bomb-ridden towns of Europe. This may be the only known image of Corporal Lawrence ever recorded, taken several days after his return from the hole in the German trench. Well, that's odd. He must be the old man, but he's young in this picture. Hello! Hello! You? Yes. Hi. Yeah, we're reading about the old man. Pretty popular one. And I remembered it. I actually hadn't read the old man's entry before. I already read the main entry. Now I'm just looking over the hyperlinked posts, entries. So we just went over the first one, which is the young man, which is hyperlinked to this one. Now we're going to scroll down and we're going to look at this one. SCP-106 will attack and collect multiple prey items during a hunting behavior event. Whoop! I'm going to close that one. Treats. That's what this one is called. Taking a sip of water before I start. I think I'm just going to read these added entries, and then I'm going to end the stream, you know? I was going to go over one of the other ones, either one on SCP-001 or SCP-1128, as has been suggested. There was also another one I wanted to read. I forgot what the name of the entry was. I'll read it some other time. I really should make notes for these streams, shouldn't I? Anyway, let's get to this entry. It's called Treats, and it is in relation to SCP-106, the Old Man. Have I seen SCP-4511? Let me see. SCP-4511. I'm going to have a look. If I haven't, I might read it at some point. I'm going to make notes about it. Let's see. This one is... What's it called? Oh, I think I know about this one. Maybe. Let me see. Just give me a second. I might... The Factory. I think I've read this one. I think I have. A large mechanical construct. I might have read it. I read one that was about a factory. I read it in here, actually, on stream. It was a factory where everyone lived in it. It was kind of like one of the episodes of Black Mirror where everyone lives in it and everyone works in there, and there's man-made horrors beyond my comprehension in there. It was a very interesting one. It might not be the same one. The Swine God. 4511. I don't know. We'll check it out later, some other time. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna get back to reading this one. I will be... It's called Treats. Alright, this is a note by Dr. Alec. It says, I would like to here again state that 106 is not, as is commonly believed, a basic predator on par with an advanced shark. SCP-106 is a sentient being, albeit a totally alien one. SCP-106 appears to be aware of several things beyond the scope of pure instinct and genetic memory. SCP-106 consistently breaches at moments where recovery and containment are most difficult. A fox may see his way out of a trap, but only a man will wait for his captors to look away to escape. Alright. Dr. Alec, on sentience in contained humanoids. Yep. Alright, here we go. For fuck's sake, where the hell is it? Agent Wang sighed, rubbing his face through his mask. The night was chill, but all three men were sweating badly. All around them surged horrors, monsters, demons, fantasy beasts, and animate objects, giggling and roaring as they wandered. The three men in gas masks and armored suits looked underdressed, if anything. As they stood, one man suddenly reached out, a gloved fist grabbing a mildly drunk zombie, tugging it close for a few seconds, before releasing him back to the surge of humanity, the undead beast cursing and stumbling away. Fucking Halloween bullshit. We need to seal this whole area. Agent Drac shook his head, gesturing to the traveling packs of costume revelers. The rail car popped too close to the city. It wasn't even supposed to be on this track. They think MCMD might have buggered up or something. Can't clamp the whole town without major fallout. What the hell do they think will happen now? The old bastard is out there and we can't even fucking find him. Wen kicked a discarded wrapper, glaring through the tinted lenses at everyone who didn't have to chase hell for a living. Drac patted the fuming man on the back. Easy, big fella. Command figures the old man will take a couple people, then does his lazy crocodile thing. That's easier to cover than why a major city had to be quarantined on Halloween. Parks, until now a little more than a statue, crackled in with his broken, rusty voice. How hard is it to find a rotten old man that kills everything it touches? Wang shook his head, still scanning the crowd. He just looks like an old man most of the time. He can look however he wants. Normally, we tell people to just follow the screaming. Fat fucking lot of good that does now. Where the hell is our expert? A brittle, creaking chuckle rolled over the radio. Harkin says he's as much an expert on SCP-106 as a plane crash survivor is an expert on aviation. They won't field lab techs until our initial eval. We're on our own for now. The three men stood, awash in horrors, looking for one that would not put all the... The three men stood, awash in horrors, looking for one that would put all the rest to shame. Alright, let's scroll. Oh, cool. We love pronouns in the chat. Very good. The drunk angel wandered on the edge of the fire. Demons, zombies, and pop culture icons swirled around her, moving like a single mass before scattering into small clusters and pairs, only to surge back together. The bonfire seemed to roar in time with the pounding music. The field chosen for the sudden teen invasion was just far enough to avoid noise complaints, but not far enough to attract unwanted adult oversight. Alcohol flowed, people giggled, and the sharp snap of lowered inhibitions and teen angst was thick in the chill air. The night was still young, yet already several pairs drifted from the comfort of the fire to seek other comforts in the dark. Private woods ringing in the field. The angel glared at the silent trees, taking another pull on an almost empty beer. She drained it, then tossed it down to meet a holocaust of its brothers being slowly kicked and stamped into the soft dirt. She should be here. She should be there, being held in warm arms, kissing a warm mouth, but no. She decided to run with the one boy who seemed to think the moment before a party was the best time to bring up his worries about our relationship. Bastard. Jeez. The angel, now with lopsided wings, started to wander to those cool, dark trees. Fuck him. If he wanted to toss her aside, fine. But that didn't mean she wouldn't get to have fun still. She giggled a bit, smiling for the first time in a while. Why not have a little fun? Play a trick and get her treat. She laughed, the flush of wicked amusement and booze high in her cheeks. She'd seen one of the boys from her study hall wander back here. Maybe she could find him. Get a little better acquainted. Jeez. She walked into the cooler darkness. The occasional giggle, snip of whisper, or a flash of a glow stick, and the only indication of life. She stumbled over a root, staggering forward and bracing her hand on a slimy tree trunk. She yanked her hand away almost instantly, the gritty, oozing texture making her palm burn. The loss of support almost sending the angel sprawling. She squinted at her hand, making out a smear of gritty, fibrous jelly coating it, the burning getting worse as she noticed the odd pits eaten into the trunk of the tree. The angel shivered, suddenly sober, and very aware of the fact that nobody knew where she was, and that she knew of nobody close enough to even call for her. She tried to rub her palm against her poofy skirts, not noticing the red and black smear she made on it, eyes wide and staring, some deep, dim part of her primordial brain ringing in alarm. She started to walk, quickly focusing on the waving beacon of the bonfire, trying to make herself feel silly to ignore the swelling, unreasoning panic. A twig broke behind her. She froze. A white shade, one hand dripping blood from a corrosive injury she would have been horrified about had she looked. The angel didn't dare look back, but she was terrified to run, to hear something following, reaching, grabbing. Moments passed, filled with nothing, the angel finally resolving to run right at the moment when a thin, bony hand reached through her costume into the muscles of her back like a nasty child squishing his hands into a cake. She screamed, or tried to. The sound squelched to little more than a harsh bark by the sheer volume of pain, limbs suddenly boneless and leaden, nerves dead except for agony. She felt fingers touching her ribs from the inside, even as they were slowly eaten away and corroded, her body shifting slowly to face the hand's owner. The flicker of the distant fire showed something withered, dark, slimy, and pulpy soft, but wiry and strong. Two milky black eyes glistened at her in a too large head, hovering over a frozen corpse grin, teeth thin and chipped. The pinned angel gasped and blubbered, feeling an oily, burning corruption seeping into her body, trying to ignore a slow-falling feeling, trying not to feel the ground below her turning mushy and soft, swallowing both figures inch by inch. It leaned closer, and despite the searing horror of that face, some still sane part of her welcomed what was surely an approaching end to her pain. It lingered, however, the other twisted claw of a hand rising as the ground started to swallow their hips. The new touch made the angel lucid with a new fear. Her face locking on those rotten eyes, she recognized the shine behind them and started to scream with a new repulsed horror, even as it started to pull both her dress and skin away in sodden ribbons. Nasty! That is nasty. This is fun. Ooh. I love the chat activity. I love that things are going on in here. I'm just reading the chat right now. Just give me a second, guys. SCP-999. Oh, I love SCP-999. That was nice. 853. I don't recognize that one. Stream has been interruption. Yes. Human tentacles. I don't know that one. Alright. Anyway, I'm gonna keep reading. Ooh, this one's kind of a long one, too. Jason ran, lungs burning, trying to yell for help between sharp gasps of air. His Batman costume felt like such a joke now, running between streetlights, feeling that warm spot of pee on his pants. I'm sorry. I should not have laughed. That's quite terrifying. Having read the thing that happened before, I think it's fair to not laugh at that. It would be fair to pee your pants. Where was everyone? They'd been so stupid trying to be the big brave kids and go out alone. Now he really was alone and his friends had probably been eaten. He didn't know this for sure, but when the boogeyman dropped out of a tree and started shoving kids into a wall that was suddenly like quicksand, it was probably a safe bet. He hadn't even been able to do anything, just watch as those long, bony fingers grabbed his two best friends and just yanked them away, like dolls, barely screaming before the squishy black wall gulped them up. The boogeyman, it hooked his fingers into David's eyes like Dad had taught him to hold a bowling ball, and Jason was abruptly sick down the front of his costume, the half-digested mass of chocolate looking unsettlingly like the goo that had splattered everywhere, while the tall, lanky, naked old man had landed out of the tree. He stopped, stumbling to his knees, coughing and gagging, wailing out a weak scream for help to the dim night, and drifted off, unheeded. The boy unable to even sob, too numb with exhaustion and horror. He barely noticed the footsteps until they were nearly on top of him. He looked up, ready to beg for whatever adult he saw for help. Then he saw the legs. Thin, black, the feet looking pulpy and flat with age, the concrete under them turning cracked and gooey. Jason looked up more, shaking more and more violently. The withered hips, the sticky, soft chest that didn't rise or fall, and finally, that nightmare head, looking like some kind of rotted pumpkin, but black and oily as a bucket of tar. The eyes locked on the boy's, as shiny and black as a flashlight in a basement. The teeth parted, some kind of rolling, slimy blackness shifting inside. Jason stumbled back, gasping, trying to scream, but unable to even breathe correctly. He stared at the boogeyman as he rolled something in the palm of that thin, beaten hand, pulling it between two bony fingers and lifting it to his mouth. The boy thought it was a candy or something, but then he saw the glint of metal. It was his best friend Anthony's front tooth. It still had the bracket from his braces on it. The boogeyman placed it between his teeth gently, the tooth still white and clean in that filthy, dripping mouth. He seemed to hold it there a moment, then his jaw bunched, and the tooth shivered, then burst like a jawbreaker under a car tire. He chewed it twice, then just stopped, still staring at the boy. It seemed to go on and on. Jason, unsure if he was even breathing anymore, knowing that this was the end. This was what happened when you didn't listen, when you went off alone. The boogeyman came and took you forever and always. But he didn't. He turned, seeming to get ready to take a step, then fell forward slowly, like an old man tripping over a shoe. The black monster almost hit the ground, but just fell through it, like it was made of air. Nothing but a black smear left behind on the concrete, and the tiny corroded bracket from the tooth. When they found him, hours later, he gripped it hard enough to embed it into his palm. Oh, poor boy. Poor lad. Traumatized. Traumatized boy. Anyway. Glanced at the chat. I am stretching my neck a little bit. Alright. Next micro story. The boy sat, comforted and miserable. His mother had been nice enough to let him at least wear his Mario costume, but even he had to admit he was probably too sick to walk around the house, let alone outside for hours in the cold. He'd woken up vomiting, and it had just continued, his parents hoping for the best, but finally forced to cancel the trick-or-treating. As sad as he was, they did try their best to make it up to him. There was a small bowl of candy for him, with the promise any leftovers would be given to him, and he could watch all the scary movies he liked. Knock, knock. Trick or treat! Aw, such a cute turtle, and what are you, honey? I'm Rapunzel. Well, here you go, princess. Thank you. He hadn't even wanted to help pass things out. It was better to just try and ignore things, just pretend everyone else was inside too. That made it better. He tucked the flappy the floppy hat down a bit, trying to convince himself that his tummy wasn't feeling like a hedgehog rolling around inside. He watched the zombies lurch across the screen, half wishing that the screaming people running for the house were kids from school. Yikes. Oh, man. Knock, knock. Trick or treat. Oh, what a nice vampire. I'm Draculaura. Rawr. So fearsome. Here you go. Thank you. And he turned up the movie, the slow groans of the walking dead drowning out the happy shouts of the living. The worst was going to be tomorrow, being forced to listen to everyone, watch them eating candy and talking about different houses and adventures. He sighed and swallowed thickly, his stomach doing another slow, oily roll. The boy pushed away the candy he had been nibbling, suddenly sickened by even the smell. Knock. Hello? Oh. Are you with... Oh, God! The sudden rising shriek of his mother made the boy suddenly bolt upright, his stomach clenching even worse, but now totally forgotten. He couldn't see her from the couch, but he could hear noises, thumping and muffled shouts and some kind of slimy-sounding rustle, like sewage over dry leaves. He stood and started to peer around the short wall blocking the entryway, calling with a hesitant voice, scared of not getting a response, but almost equally so of getting one. He was only a few feet away when the hand whipped around the wall, gripping it tight. It was a black, gray, and thin, as bony and thin-skinned as his grandmother's, with wide, flat nails gripping the paint hard. Where it touched, a black stain was spreading, like grease on a paper bag, the knuckles looking puffy and thick as they flexed. The boy stared, backing up slowly, calling again for his mother, his voice starting to plead. The hand flexed, actually sinking into the wall as that stain spread, and a nightmare peeped around the corner. The head was thick, misshapen and lumpy. Misshapen? Misshapen. Okay, not misshapen. English is weird. Just gonna make a note of that. English is weird. It says misshapen. Alright. Like a poorly made scarecrow, the skin thin and jelly-like. Two hard, glistening eyes, the color of maggots, stared from above the thin, wide slash of a mouth. Their eyes locked, and the boy felt fear wash from his head down to his feet, his stomach boiling like a forgotten kettle. His nerves screamed to run away, but he couldn't make himself stop watching those eyes, feet moving slowly backwards like a sleepwalker. The hand and face shifted a bit, and there was a wet, heavy dragging noise as his mother was pulled into view. She was dead, or close to it, moved forward by the hand in her chest like a sock puppet. Bits of her, black and pulpy, smears of that black stain eating into her face, her neck, her arms. Her chest was a black, jelly-coated hole, the thing's other hand buried in it up to the wrist, bloodless, ruined remains of his mother hanging from it like a rag doll. He screamed, then threw up, little more than a mass of bile and half-digested snacks, then ran, shrieking up the stairs, begging for his mother, his father, anyone, someone. He slammed into the bathroom, shutting it and locking the door, shaking and crying. His dad had gone down the street to visit. He'd be home any second. And he'd fix this somehow. He'd call the cops or something. Get them out of the house. Leave that black thing far behind. Maybe Mom was just hurt. People could get really hurt and still be fine. He'd only seen her for a few seconds. The thing was just some psycho in some costume. He'd probably run off as soon as he heard someone coming. And he'd be okay then. He'd be fine. He kept whispering this to himself. Feet braced on the sink, back against the door. He was still repeating it when the face pushed through the wood above him. He heard the crackle and looked up to see that hell face looking down, inches above his head. The floor under his feet suddenly felt sludgy and soft as he stared, mouth splitting open to let out tongue as rotten and bloated as a dead fish rolled free, and down, sliding down onto that horrified face like a syrup, burning even as he felt his legs sinking down and down, unable to move really as that soft, slimy flesh burned like an acid into his face, feeling his nose cook down like an overused eraser, screaming just long enough to catch a few feet of that endless tongue in his mouth. Ew! Ah! Ew! Ah! Ugh. Okay. gagging hard before the nerves died, starting to pass out as he felt the nightmare tasting his eyes. Ew. 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 Really cool. Really gross. I wonder what this would look like in a film, you know? Like, that would be... I would love to see the creative visual effects. Like, I wouldn't say I'm grossed out easily, but I think I kind of am because I have a very vivid imagination. And at the same time, when I watch, like, movies with, like, really, really gross stuff in it, it's like, ugh! But at the same time, oh my god, it's so cool because it's all fake, you know? When you have like all these creative artists just looking at gross stuff and thinking, yeah, I could make it grosser somehow. It's always fun. Anyway, I think this might be the last one, or there might be one more. Okay, there's one more. Here we go. Here we go. Actually, no. This is the last one, and then there's like the outro story, right? Which is the what do you call it? What's the word? What is the word for it? There is the pre, and there's the other thing. I don't remember the word. Anyway, this story now. Drac awoke feeling like he'd been sleeping on a pile of rusty car parts. He sat up, twisting and trying to locate the source of the throbbing pain in his leg. That memory started to flood back, hitting like a freight train, running across town, slamming through a crowd, seeing the withered, crumbling arm laying on the ground, screams, people running, that horrible black face sliding from the ground, eyes locked on his, Parks firing, more screams, a withered hand reaching, gripping, pulling. Oh God, no. He looked around in welling horror, pleading with his own brain to lie to him. The room was dark, dirty, and low-ceilinged. Tufts of dirt and debris in the corners, the grayish paint peeling in ragged streamers. The stained ceiling and the floor warped and lumpy. A doorway opened into darkness, a vague, insistent noise sounding from far off. The light was dim, but didn't seem to come from anywhere, seeming just a weak, omnipresent glow with a slightly green cast like deep ocean water. Drac knew this room, even though he'd never been here. At least one's very much like it. The old man liked to dump his new catches here before he found them. Drac rose quickly, hunching down to avoid a sagging bulge of ceiling. He barely wanted his shoes touching this place, let alone anything else. He winced, feeling a dull, empty ache in his leg, high in the calf, probably where it grabbed him, and damned if he was going to check it. He limped a few steps, making sure it could bear weight, eyes sweeping over every surface. He breathed slow, deeply remembering the file, the brief. Time was subjective. He could have been out for seconds, or weeks. It liked to play cat and mouse, trekking through its home, or playroom, or whatever the fuck it was. Space was endless, but sometimes people got out, or were released. Keep moving, don't hide, because it was God here and would know. Because, what? Keep moving, don't hide, because it was God here and would know. What does that mean? What is this phrase? Am I reading it wrong? Keep moving, don't hide, because it was God here and would know. I don't know what that means. I'm gonna keep going. He felt panic slithering around the edges of his brain and pushed it down, hard, face set and grim as he stepped out into the darkness beyond the doorway. Okay, good night. I'm gonna keep reading. Beyond the doorway. The hall was long and broken, like a hospital hallway after an earthquake. No big holes, just twisted and tilted oddly. He creeped down as close to a wall as he could get without touching it, feeling gritty plaster crunch under his feet. The noise was louder, the sound of high-pitched monotonous crying. It set the teeth on edge, but they'd said it would be like this. The key was to keep moving, keep looking. Yes, it was endless, but if you kept on the move, it seemed like 106 got confused or lost track of things, and you could accidentally wander back into the world. He kept repeating the steps, the briefing in his head like a prayer, ignoring the part where 106 would typically hunt escapees forever. He took a right at the end of the hall, passing down another, then a left, starting to move faster, ignoring the odd corroded twists of pipe and wire in some of the rooms he'd passed, or the suggestive soggy mounds of something. The crying kept getting louder, the high-pitched gurgling wail of a baby. Ignore it. Keep moving. It called the shots. It could make the whole place sound like a dentist drill if it wanted. Drac pounded down a hall, nearly at a dead run, trying not to see the growing dampness of the walls, the changing texture of things, broken plaster over old greenish bricks, floor going from broken vinyl to concrete to dirt. He turned a corner, too fast, a gooey patch of black causing his foot to skitter, nearly dropping him to his knees as he clutched the bare, wet brick wall. He looked out in the dim, mossy room, the sound of helpless, angry crying, very, very loud now. He froze, staring, half crouched and clutching the wall. He was standing in the middle of the room, a thick, ankle-deep puddle of black jelly at its feet. The old man was turning, slowly, rocking in slow side-to-side motions. The crying was coming from the thing in his arms. It was a torso, wrapped in masses of what looked like barbed wire. The wire threaded in and out of flesh, some places looking like the bleeding skin had flowed like warm taffy over it. The ragged remains of the limbs twisted and stretched, every movement making the wires dig and tear more. It was hairless, the skin of its bare head and neck looking peeled and rotten, the face a mask of pain. The throat had been opened carefully and twisted and held with wires. The baby crying was, in fact, this grown, mute torso, mutilated to make that pitiful, helpless wail. The old man was watching him, face turned, eyes locked, to the man as he slowly tried to stand upright, ignoring the hissing of his boots, trying not to think of what would have to be done to a throat to make it sound like a baby wailing in agony, or where that pitiful torso's limbs had gone. It watched him, cracked teeth, slightly parted, and slowly stopped its rocking. It dropped the wire-bound bundle, arms going limp at its sides as the mass of flesh and pain bounced off the ground, then rested face down in the mossy grime, sending up a new wave of protest between bubbly, sucking breaths. It turned to face him, arms dangling, body wrapped in what looked like some kind of shredded cloth of oozing black fabric. Drac ran, bolting like a scared deer, throwing training and conditioning to the wind in a mad, blind animal panic of escape. He screamed, panted, talked, laughed, anything to drown out the sound of the slow, stuttering steps lurking behind him. He ran and ran and ran, falling and hitting the ground like he'd been hit by a car, gasping and waiting for the end, muscles throbbing. Then they would start again, those soft, rustling footsteps, driving him on and on and on. He didn't know it, but he'd run for 4 days before the old man started taking chunks out of him. Oh boy, that's fun. Yeah, that sentence made no sense. Basically means only God will know. Well, that makes enough sense, I guess. Yeah, whatever. This is the epilogue. That's the word. I remembered the name of it. It's an epilogue. Not a prologue, but an epilogue. Recovery was in the pre-dawn hours with no sun or moon, and went shockingly smooth, all things considered. SCP-106 was found in the middle of a field, making pumpkins sag and burst by squeezing or stepping on them. The team, a man short, was finally reinforced an hour before they caught it, pushing it back to the recovery chamber with big halogen sun guns, nearly blinding 2 of the recovery crew in their zeal to have the old man back under lock and key. It sat in the cell without a moment's attempt to try and escape. It sat and did nothing, head tilted and arms and legs limp. One MTF member stated that it looked sated and was told to shut up in an official capacity. Disappearances were glossed over, murders quieted and made unnewsworthy, urban legends seeded and caressed. Overall, it went well once the hell was over. Weeks later, an observation tech made a note in the day's log. SCP-106 was observed to suddenly produce a large handful of small white objects, later identified as teeth and finger bones, and set the pile on the floor. It then sorted these objects into what seemed random piles, later identified as separated by age of victim. It then stared at these items for several hours, then recollected them. The significance of this was considered unworthy of contemplation. Well, that's fun. They must be the treats. Those teeth, they must be the treats. I think that's it. I think that's the point of that. Anyway, that was that. Next, we have the next entry, which is to be data expunged, which is this one, until death. This is a shorter one, I think. I don't know. It's 10:30 for me right now. It's kind of late. I should probably go to bed. I need to make a list. And then there's another one, which is a lot shorter than the other ones. I don't know. I'm kind of tired now. I guess I could continue tomorrow. Let's see. Spoilers though, like, don't actually read it while I'm scrolling through it. This kind of. I think I could read it. I think I'll read it because I'm curious. This one is called Until Death. She didn't hear it. Not at first. At this time of night, the labs were deserted. The whole of Site-120 was practically empty. Corridors dim and silent. Offices shut. Experimental apparatus crouched in shadowy chambers. There were no anomalies contained on site, so the only people left in the compound were a couple of security staff and a 63-year-old researcher, hunched over a bench full of notes and textbooks. A single desk lamp bright against the lab's enveloping darkness. She'd always been wrapped up in her work, her colleagues said. There was no one to go home to. She had been with the Foundation for many years, many late nights like this, engrossed in the calculations and correlations spread in front of her, and so she didn't hear the noise, not when it started. A soft, crackling hiss from the far corner of the lab. A sound like wet leaves in a fire, like whispers from a dried-up throat just at the edge of hearing. It wasn't until she breathed in the smell, faint but thick with rot, that she started from her work, turned, and noticed the sound. The researcher pulled herself down from her lab stool, that familiar stiffness in her hips, an unwelcome reminder of the hours and years she had been in the lab. Absently, she pushed her glasses back up and peered across the darkened room. The noise was still there. A few seconds of listening failed to resolve it into anything readily explainable. She had taken 4 steps across the lab when the lamp behind her blinked out. Swallowed in darkness, she froze. The noise had gone. Her breathing had grown rapid and shallow, and she forced 2 deeper breaths before taking out her phone and switching it on the torch. After a moment's hesitation, she turned back to the workbench to see what had happened to the light. As the torch being swung, the first thing she registered was that there was something different on her pile of work. Something foreign, dark, wet, bloody. Her brain caught up. It was a human kidney, complete with ureter and a tangle of blood vessels. It glistened in the torchlight, a crimson stain seeping into the paper beneath it. Her throat grew tight. The noise started again. It was thicker somehow, moist. She looked over her shoulder, indecisive. Her brain was blank, reacting without thinking, 1,000 other choices pushed out by the sheer impossibility of that noise. This mangled organ in front of her. Stay here or go there. Almost before she realized, she was walking cautiously across the shadowed room towards the source of the sound. Why would you do that? This is horror movie basics. Don't go towards the creepy sound. You will end up dead. Anyway, the torch lit up the back wall of the lab. A corner behind the mass spectrometer. A black smear had spread across it, the paint and plaster bubbling and flaking in a slow roil. The whispering sizzle was louder, and the air was heavy with an oily stink of decay. Close to, she could see the surface of the wall had softened, sagging in wet bulges. She hesitated. The hand shot out of the wall faster than thought. Its fingers were broad and gray, sticky with black mucus, grabbing her forearm. Instantly, her lab coat started to melt, and she yanked her arm away as the sleeve tore off, disintegrating. The fingers snatched at her again, and she dropped her phone. As she stumbled backwards, the torch shone up from the floor, lighting the figure that pushed its way through the mottled, fleshy wall. It looked like an old man, decrepit and rotten. It was naked, its skin slick and shiny as pitch. Its flesh was withered and decomposing, with missing toes and misshapen feet. Misshapen feet. Again, that word. A distended gut protruded obscenely from beneath a narrow chest, arms spread wide in a mockery of greeting. Above a ruined throat she saw a too-wide mouth locked in a rictus grin, and eyes. Oh God, those eyes. The thing emerging from the wall before her looked like a man, but its eyes were gray and flat as a shark's. The researcher took another 2 steps back, reaching behind her for something, anything solid to hold. Her breath caught in her throat. The old man stood still, dripping black foulness onto the floor as the tiles began liquefying beneath him. Her phone sank beneath the surface. The torch flickered out. In darkness, she ran. She was panting by the time she reached the lab doors, rueing her age, the extra weight she carried, every exercise session she postponed. As she turned to close the doors behind her, she could see that hideous figure pacing deliberately across the room. Something about its lack of hurry unnerved her deeply. She forced herself to keep running down the corridor, calling for the night guard, hoping he was close. "Frank? Frank!" After the second turn, she saw him, halfway from the guard station, gun in his hand. "What's wrong?" Frank jogged up to her, and she doubled over, spots in her vision. "Frank, thank God, it's..." Her chest was heaving, and she could hardly speak. How could she describe what she had just seen? "Slow down, eh? Take a second to..." Frank tailed off, and she looked up to see his gaze fixed on the end of the dim corridor. She knew what he had seen. The old man walked towards them, trailing a viscid ooze. When Frank trained the torch on him, his eyes shone avid and empty, 20 feet from them. "Hey, stop now!" Frank shouted. I will shoot you. I don't know how to deliver that. I will shoot you. Just, who says the whole "I will" when they're gonna say that they're gonna shoot someone? Just, the grinning cadaver kept coming. 15 feet, 12. Frank fired 3 shots. 2 hits to the chest. The old man stopped, gradually crumpling forward. The researcher let out a breath. The glistening corpse sank into the floor, swallowed by the slime it had generated. She felt sick with shock. "What the fuck was that?" Frank started towards the blanketed floor, but she held his sleeve. "Wait, I think it's some kind of acid." Her voice was hushed. Her throat felt raw. "We need to call someone." Frank pulled out his radio, but paused, his thumb over the button. "Not until I know what to report." Suddenly she didn't want him to move away, not even a few feet. "Please," she said, stepping into Frank's path. "There's nothing like this on the database. There's nothing. We need an MTF." "Hey, don't tell me my job," said Frank, sounding piqued. "First I need to..." "No!" She was gripping his sleeves. "Frank, I know dimensional anomalies, and this was from one. I saw it step out of a wall." Frank tried to shrug her off, but pushed too hard. She fell awkwardly, a wrench of pain from her ankle. Tears sprang to her eyes, and Frank was instantly regretful. "Oh, God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean..." He cut off as a glob of black mucus landed on his radio, setting it fizzing. Frank dropped it like he had been stung and glanced upwards. The next drop landed in his right eye. The researcher scrambled backward as Frank roared and clutched his face. She could hear the hiss as the corrosion ate at his eye socket from the inside. Then she saw that grinning face emerge from the dark patch on the ceiling, and the old man dropped onto Frank's back. One hand slid into the muscles of his shoulder like it was dough, and Frank's roar became a scream. As he crashed into the wall of the corridor, she saw the other hand sink into Frank's throat and tear, and the scream was abruptly cut off. Frank started to collapse into the wall as it darkened around him. The last thing she saw was those eyes locked on hers as they sank back into the blackness. Empty eyes, but somehow full of promise. Her heart pounded and the taste of bile was in her throat. She tried to stand, but she was lightheaded, and her ankle was throbbing. She had to run. She had to run. Every second not running was death. Dragging herself up on a cabinet, she tried to think, eyes flicking between the ruined radio and the puckered bruises on the wall and floor. Run. Where? Guard's office. The alarm. She forced herself forward, gasping at the pain in her foot. Her lungs burned. Every shadow in the half-lit hallway loomed like a threat. Not much further now. Don't look behind. Each step was a battle, trying to move faster, to stop her leg from buckling. Forward momentum was the only thing keeping her upright. She rounded the last corner, saw the guard station at the end of the hall. It looked empty. She could make it. With a grunt of effort, she pushed herself to a final run, closing the final yards, crashing through the guardroom doors. Her first step inside sank shin-deep into the frothing muck that used to be the floor. She fell and her hands were caught too, skin burning as they were sucked deeper into the ground. Looking up, she could see the console with the alarm button just out of reach, and she wailed in sick despair. It was the last sound she had made before the world was consumed by night. Death did not come. She was submerged in a lake of pitch, but somehow the researcher could still breathe, could still think. Was she still falling? She couldn't tell. All feeling had vanished, her skin no longer stinging, although the blood still pounded at her ankle. Although the blood still pounded in her ankle. She stayed there, suspended for minutes, unsure of the passing time, of what this meant. Then the gloom lightened, blurred, and resolved into a tiled floor. The gray light showing her a room she didn't recognize, but which was somehow familiar. Dust, dead leaves, and scraps of metal were strewn across the floor, and one of the walls had buckled in on itself. She pulled herself over to the door and looked out into the dilapidated hallway, mold and rust covering the ceiling, and the floor contorted like a writhing snake. There were no lights, but the hall was lit by a gray-green glow, a sickly aurora undulating sluggishly across every surface. She'd been right. It was a dimensional anomaly, probably controlled by that thing. The researcher felt desperate. Probably it had made this place or had lived here for many years, so it would know every inch. But if she had fallen into it, that meant there was a way out. She just had to keep moving, and she would find it. She limped into a corridor, clambering over collapsed furniture and wiping plaster dust from her hands. The familiarity of the place snatched at her thoughts, but she tried to ignore them. Keep going forward. Look for an exit. Don't think about what might be behind you. Don't think about Frank. Don't think about that eyes. About that grin. Those eyes. A metallic buzzing grew louder, and she realized that it had been there since she had arrived in this place. She tried to move faster. A gust of wind blew around her, fetid. Her heart was racing again. This place was familiar, but how? She needed to stop just for a moment. She grabbed at a door handle, relief flooding her when it opened. She walked into her old apartment and spun in confusion. This was impossible. The disarray of the halls was gone. Everything here was in its proper place, but nothing about this place was proper. She left this apartment 20 years ago. The building had been torn down. The researcher sped across the room. The need to rest had been forgotten. Everything here was hers, her books, her furniture. The window showed the same view, an incongruously bright day. How? She raced to the bedroom, her bed made, everything neatly put away. She opened the closet, and the corpses fell out on her. It was a mountain of decomposing limbs and organs, limp and slick. They slithered down at her under the weight of the pile. Trailing gore, she retched at the deep, foul smell of the putrescence, flailing wildly to pull herself free. A bloated hand pawed at her leg as it fell, and she felt something slippery and soft under her feet as she stood. This assemblage would have taken dozens of bodies, she thought, still gagging. As it slumped further, it exposed a face she recognized. Frank. A deep hole where his eye had been, and his neck was torn open, black jelly dripping from the flesh. Her eyes scanned the line of his body and saw his leg twisted viciously upwards, exposed bone protruding where the foot had been ripped off. She was still trying to hold a scream when she heard movement from the back of the closet. Without thinking, she ran. Behind her, the sounds of sinewy limbs pulling themselves clear of the corroded wall. She bolted for the door of her apartment. Ankles screaming at her, she could feel the old man enter the room only a few steps back. The metallic buzz constricted around her as she emerged. Staggering down the hallway, realization overwhelmed her. This wasn't some old hospital or school. Her apartment had given her the answer. It was twisted, corrupted, but this was Site 120. She couldn't think about why that was. What it meant right now was that she might know a way out. She took a left turn, skidding on the wet floor and crashing her head on the opposite wall. Her ears rang. The footsteps behind her were louder, closer. She dragged herself onwards, her breath a whimper from the pain in her left foot. One more corridor, and she should be back up to the guard room. She hoped like hell that the dimensional parallels held up. The footsteps grew closer. She could hear the drip of ichor. Her vision grew dark. The hall telescoped in front of her. A hand clutched at her back, her lab coat melting to tatters. The guard room was just ahead. She was exhausted. She couldn't make it. The floor beneath her started to bubble. With a yell, she crashed through the guard room doors again, pushing through the oily puddle behind them and surfacing in the real Site 120. The ghoul was still behind her. She fell hard on the console and slammed her hand down on the alarm. Klaxons blared and the emergency light flashed. She turned, pushing herself as far as she could into the corner of the console, but the old man had halted in the middle of the room. He was staring at the light. She heard a new noise, like a deep growl. Suddenly, she realized that the corpse before her had a lump of new flesh in its throat, bloody and ragged. Frank's throat, she realized, and her stomach dropped. She looked again at the old man, seeing its misshapen carcass, patched and scarred. The old man was still transfixed by the light. Its growl built in intensity. Red. Her mouth went dry. The thing looked at her with its dead eyes. Anna. It said, like a sigh, Anna. She made no sound. Her mind was screaming. The old man took a step towards her. Another step. 5 years, 11 months, 21 days, and 25 more years after that, falling apart, rebuilding itself, rebuilding its world for her. It held up its left hand. She could see the marks where the ring had been. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The old man reached towards her, tenderly holding her cheek. Her skin puckered and liquefied, flesh dripping from her face. He brought his grinning mouth to hers and kissed her. And her teeth became hot wax, fusing and corroding. She screamed then. The old man pressed his kiss harder into her open mouth, his swollen great tongue melting hers and filling her throat with molten muscle and caustic jelly. The last thing she felt was the weight of the two of them, sinking into the floor, locked in a final burning embrace. Ugh, gross. Ooh, another hyperlink. I'm not going to read that today, and I'm not going to be able to read this other part today, which is the last hyperlink. What's this all about? SCP-106 appears. Whatever that means. Okay. But anyway, this last hyperlink is... Oh, that's why it's called Until Death. That's why this entry is called Until Death. There we go. I got it now. Okay. Let me just put this here. This one, Once But Not Now, is the hyperlink that is attached to this last one. I don't think I can read it now because my computer is going to die. Let me see how many scrolls it takes. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't think I can read this right now because my computer needs to charge and I don't have battery. So we're just gonna put a little thumbnail, a little what's the word? Little bookmark on that. There we go. Just gonna put a bookmark on that. Ooh, related. Interesting. But yeah. So that's gonna be just about it for the stream. I really hope you guys enjoyed. I love seeing a little bit of activity in chat. It's very nice. It is very late. I don't know when I'll stream again. Maybe I'll stream again soon. I don't know. Maybe I'll keep doing more of these ones because they're not so taxing on my computer. But I would really like to get back to like gaming pretty soon. You know, I have a world on Stardew Valley that I haven't touched. I have a multiplayer thing also on Stardew Valley that I haven't been able to work on because my computer would simply explode. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today, you know, on the SCP Foundation rating entries. I'll have to definitely just look into the other ones that were mentioned during this stream. And I will, of course, as usual, be putting up this stream on YouTube, you know, on the VODs channel. So yeah, this is going to be for the next stream, once but not now, because it's related to this one. I didn't get to read it. So, yep, I hope you guys had fun and stuff. This has been a pretty good stream. I like that I read good. It sounds a little silly, but like, you get the idea, right? I like reading these. They're really cool. Yep. I forgot how to end streams. I haven't streamed in a good bit. So yeah. We'll see what happens next time. I'm gonna go to bed, put my computer to charge. Yep. Okay. I should put some outro music. Wait. Put on a track. Put on a track. Let me see. Where is it? Did I close YouTube? No, here it is. Okay. Let's just put on a track. There we go. How about... Yeah, this one. This one's good. Here we go. Or is that just gonna kill my computer? Whatever. Nah, there's an ad. Okay, never mind. Forget about the outro music. There's an ad. I don't want to deal with that. Goodbye. Yep. Okay, that's it. Bye. I'm gonna go. Goodbye. I'm gonna go to bed. Good night, or good morning, or good afternoon. Whatever. Okay. Okay, that's it. Okay, bye. Bye. Go do other things, or sleep, or whatever. Bye. Bye.